Hey friends, hope you're having a wonderful start to the week. So, in my last video, I did mention that I'll be kind of talking about what lies underneath the iceberg for Salesforce. Salesforce being a multi tenant SaaS platform, the interoperability, the accessibility, the performance, the maintenance, all these, the hard parts, are kind of hidden from us as users or as implementers. But it's kind of interesting to learn how Salesforce does the magic. So if we look at it, Salesforce can the whole ecosystem of Salesforce that at the underlying level can be categorized into three components. So one is the system, other is the data, and third is the kernel. Well, the order is system, kernel, and the data. So when I say system, or for that matter, when we say multi-tenant platform, if we think of it in a conceptual way, it is actually one user or one organization, one tenant that has access to the entire Salesforce ecosystem, but with their own set of metadata, apps, configurations, and their own set of users. Now, if we look at Salesforce, it is actually a massive distributed system. And when we say massive distributed system, it is probably hundreds of data centers across the world. Each data center would have few thousands of instances. And when I say instance is actually a copy of that code, the entire application code, the database, the cache server, the search server, and all the other services and APIs that will run around it. That defines one instance, and one tenant lives on one instance. So, like that, a data center would have multiple instances, and each instance would have thousands of servers. That's how huge and massive a Salesforce system ecosystem is. And it is very interesting to learn that when there is, this multi-tenancy, there is this millions of transactions happening, not just in a minute, but in a second across the globe. How does Salesforce maintain the read consistency and the write consistency and the the lag that happens when the data is stored? This is something very interesting and mind-boggling to look into because those who would have worked with that full stack or configuring a database or who would have worked with databases, they know keeping a master slave or a master database also causes to latency, leading to non updated data, right? But for Salesforce, it is very interesting to see how Salesforce achieves it. So if we kind of look at just what I was talking about, the three parts, the system, the kernel, and the data. So the system, like I mentioned, is a set of instances, and each instance associates with one tenant, right? So each tenant has their own set of code and metadata and database and so on. Now, the second part is the kernel. So when I say kernel, that is the application logic container. And this logic container basically is a set of 20 to 40 stateless servers. And why stateless? I think you all understand that. But just to kind of elaborate, what stateless means is there is the request would come in the server, in the container, and that kernel would just pick it up based on the requirement. It would just churn it and redirect it to the right location. Okay. And this is done. So there are 2040 servers with a load balancer. It will take the request that comes from the tenant, the instance, and it will redirect to the database. All right. And this is a Jerry Java application server. And I think those who are in the Java world, of course, know it. And we also have heard Jerry is that Java application server which will do this job. Now, the third part is the data. And the data is so pretty much it sits on the Oracle relational database. Of course, there are other databases around to do various other activities, etc., machine learning and so on. But primarily, it's the Oracle relational database, which is the heart of Salesforce. And it's very interesting how it is managed, right? So this database also, it is, and we'll look into it deeper how it is done. But there are shards of database which are created, which are accessible, vertical shards. And that's how it works. So in a nutshell, if we look, um, how it is done is that there is a tenant. The tenant will come login.salesforce.com, .com, and when they put in the credentials, what happens is this app server that will pick those credentials, and there is a virtual schema which will say that this tenant belongs to this instance and this belongs to this instance. And that is how, when you say anyone, any two in the URL, the instances, so that's how the instances are associated to the names. So when a tenant logs in, user logs in, that's how instance is mapped, and then one person, and that person is able to log in and access the metadata, the apps, the configurations, and so on. Interesting, isn't it? So, it's probably a lot to chew upon. You can probably reach out to me in person if you want to know more. But I think the next video will talk about how the database, the world of database, how Salesforce does that. All right. Till then, stay tuned. Ciao, ciao.